It's now time for me to introduce our first keynote speaker today, Mr. William Hughes, the former Director General of the UK Serious and Organised Crime Agency. Bill was appointed to the position of inaugural Director General of SOCA in August 2004, and the agency commenced operations in April 2006 as the first UK-wide national and international law enforcement agency. Prior to taking up his appointment, Bill had been the head of the National Crime Squad operating across England and Wales, during which time he led the organisation in tackling serious and organised crime. Bill was awarded the Queen's Police Medal in the 2001 Queen's Birthday Honours, and in 2009 was made a Commander of the Order of the British Empire. Bill retired in August 2010 after an innings of 35 years in police and law enforcement, which is a significant achievement. So we're very pleased to have Bill here with us today. He'll be presenting on the topic, Dealing with Serious and Organised Crime Must Become a Serious Business Within All National Security Strategies. Over to Bill Hughes.
I suppose in a way I can sympathise with Bill around the Indigenous people, being the token POM here today, and also being of Welsh descent, because the English did the same to the Welsh to an extent. But I'll move on from that, and I want to ask Ken Jones for his views on that. We may give it later. For today, what I'd like to do as well is talk to you around the proposition that you've seen there. But before we start, I'd like to make one comment, which is I'd like to dedicate what I'm saying to the memory of a great man, Sir Robert Mark, who died a few weeks ago, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police back in the 70s, a great forward thinker in terms of policing. But the debt that we owe to him as detectives is that he got rid of corrupt detectives and made detective in the United Kingdom an honourable profession and not what it had become. And he's an important milestone, and we should continue to think about that. As I listened just now to what Simon was saying, pinching most of the things that I was going to say anyway, it occurred to me that we have a lot in common in the approach. Now, I'm honoured to have been asked to give a keynote speech at this conference. After 35 years as a cop, with the last 10 years as the head of the UK National Crime Squad and then the head of its successor, the Serious Organised Crime Agency, I wanted to bring to this event my considered view on how we should seek to combat serious organised crime in the future. I didn't want to simply rehearse what's been done in the UK, or anywhere else for that matter, because I think that we all have an important review to conduct of how effective we have been to date. We must not, however, fall into the trap of thinking that all we need to do for the future is more and better the same, the point that Simon was making just now. We must look at how our enemy will change for the future, and like all successful strategic reviews since Sun Tzu and the Art of War, we need to know our enemy and ourselves. Are we properly structured and resourced to fight and win? If we're not, we shouldn't engage in combat with the enemy. On a strategic front, we have to aim to win the campaign and not just individual battles. For that reason, my proposition to you all today is that serious and organised crime is already starting to be and will in future become the most serious impact upon democracies and governments' ability to control their own states. The approach to combating it must be seen as the most serious business of government and requires governments and law enforcement agencies to jointly set out their response within and as part of their national security strategies. You may say that's all well and good, but we have national security strategies designed for dealing with the really serious issues of terrorism, not organised crime, which is obviously just the job of law enforcement. Now, until recently, many in law enforcement might have agreed with that statement. But what do we mean by serious organised crime? Who are serious organised criminals? How should we deal with serious organised crime? And why does countering serious organised crime and the criminals involved not receive the same attention and resources from governments as countering terrorism? Now, Before you start to think that all I'm doing is making a thinly veiled plea for more money, cops and resources for dealing with serious organised crime, it's not. I believe that there are similarities between methodologies in serious organised crime and terrorism that lend them to be addressed by similar approaches by both law enforcement and counter-terrorism specialists. There are also, of course, significant differences, but at present governments regard them differently and do not see serious organised crime as a problem either in its own right or as politically important for them to address. Now, my contention is that both serious organised crime and terrorism have to be addressed as joint parts of single national security strategies and not separate phenomena. Not for the reason you may imagine, that of shared resources and approaches, but because they both threaten society and both require a national strategic approach to effectively counter their actions and impact. Now, whilst terrorism usually seeks to manifest itself in spectacular events designed to spread panic and fear, serious organised crime is constantly with us in all societies around the world. Many people and governments perceive serious organised crime as they imagine the mafia or all the other organised crime groups that have historically been described in that way. But what we have now is, in many ways, an alternative form of global and multinational business. It's linked and spans the world and defies simple resolution by individual nation states. It corrupts and suborns law enforcement, governments and legitimate business. Governments around the world have realised that the answer to dealing with terrorism is through joined-up working, both within their own countries and internationally with other countries. They've established joint expeditionary forces to operate in those countries where the terrorist threat appears to emanate or seeks to intrude and take over. Although the necessary action under the rule of law where terrorists are arrested is clearly for law enforcement officers to investigate, prepare for prosecution and support the case, that is only a part of the much wider and fundamental response to terrorism by governments. My view is it must be recognised that in a similar way, dealing with serious organised crime and the criminals involved is now beyond the capability of law enforcement alone and requires national and international coordination of effort and approaches in the same way that governments have combined in international peacekeeping and interventionist approaches. The effects of serious organised crime are not seen simply in wars between rival groups, but impact upon the lives of all citizens in all countries. It uses violence, extortion and exploitation, and like all parasites, it finds support and often unintended protection in the environment where it operates. Now, I'm not saying that law enforcement has failed or is losing against individual serious organised criminals or even sophisticated organised crime networks. That is not the case. And at this conference we will hear of tremendous advances in knowledge and understanding, the approach and success against serious organised crime. It is the way that governments have sought to manage law enforcement that has contributed to a situation developing where for too long most law enforcement agencies have worked at a tactical level, not engaging in strategic approaches primarily because they can't on their own. They've been monitored through rigid bureaucratic committee structures with a lack of coordination. Indeed, in some countries, there are those who believe that competition between law enforcement agencies is a good thing and will lead to an improvement in each agency as they seek to win funding and resources against their competing agencies. The words partnership and information sharing are rarely, if ever, heard in those circumstances. What does result is glory grabbing and the denigration of those who should be colleagues. The only winners in that type of environment are the criminals. Law enforcement has had to take a short-term focus because that is what their political masters take. Individual cases are investigated instead of considering the mechanisms and environment that allows serious organised crime to operate and preventative strategies designed to prevent the crime for the future are not considered or implemented. As a consequence, law enforcement often chases its own tail. Law enforcement leaders that have been successful with governments because of their achievement of tactical level measures may not therefore see the value of strategic analysis of the issues. Most damning of all, however, is that governments are seen dealing with serious organised crime as the responsibility of law enforcement alone. Now, every so often the media will seize upon a gangland killing or some other outrageous manifestation of organised crime, or some research throws up an estimate of the economic cost of serious organised crime to countries or regions, and questions are asked as to what law enforcement are doing about this phenomenon. Tactical activity is stepped up, some of the bad guys are arrested in some well-publicised cases, and the pressure eases again. Now, serious organised crime does not need to be defined, but it does need to be recognised. In my professional law enforcement life, I've tended to shy away from hard and fast definitions of serious organised crime for two reasons. Firstly, it's like an elephant. It's difficult to describe, but obvious when you see it. Secondly, it just allows lawyers to engage in endless argument in arcane language about whether or not their client had actually transgressed a narrowly defined activity to win a sordid game in the justice arena. Now, I don't do jokes about lawyers anymore on the basis that the lawyers didn't think they were funny and non-lawyers didn't realise that I was joking. Now, definition is irrelevant with a dynamic and fast-changing subject, changing its approach, its reach and its impact. Meanwhile, law enforcement tends to fight the last battle again, rather than to look for how serious organised crime is changing, and more importantly, where the serious organised criminals have gone. The importance of having good law enforcement information is seen as a sine qua non. Intelligence-led is the slogan that too easily and glibly is used. Too often, law enforcement has relied upon those it already knows about to be monitored and to become their next targets of opportunity. There is, of course, an argument that most of those engaged in serious organised crime are recidivists, and it's their career. They get better all the time because they learn from the last investigation, courtesy of the democratic legal process, so they can plan and prepare better next time round. Once again, they set out to make their pile, and once again, law enforcement sets out to thwart them and seeks to put them back before a court for a further sentence. Once convicted, law enforcers walk away, leaving the criminals to conduct their businesses within prison and to use all the methods that they and their advisors can come up with to ensure that their ill-gotten gains are out of reach of any attempt by the authorities to seize them. After 35 years, you get a little jaundiced, so bear with me. However, what are those that law enforcement have not seen before? An example in the UK was that of missing trader intra-community fraud, or carousel fraud as it's known. Now, Simon mentioned the issue that resulted from moving oil and related hydrocarbon products between the Republic of Ireland, a member of the European Union, across the border into Northern Ireland, and the opportunities that gave the bad guys. Well, that was a pretty bad one, but this was an even better one. This involved moving, or rather pretending to move, across borders within the EU or between traders, goods that attract a value-added tax. That's a tax within the EU. The most favoured ones were mobile phones or computer chips, high-value goods but small in size and volume. Traders who claim that they've sold them on can then claim the VAT back, and so the game continues round and round as a carousel, defrauding the customs and revenue of all the EU countries. Now, many of those engaged in this fraud were originally and ostensibly legitimate business people who realised where the opportunities lay. In terrorist terms, they perhaps be known as clean skins. If we continually look at those that we've seen before, as Simon said just now, we end up deep in Rumsfeld territory, where we only know what we know and don't know what we don't know. We need to know who is engaged in crime, how effective they are, and most importantly, which of those areas of crime should become the priority for a law enforcement response.